I'd like to call the meeting to order. Do we have any public comments today?
No public comments.
No public comments? If there's no public comments, then we'll go ahead and move to some of the agenda items. Number one, presentation, discussion, and possible recommendation of the Brownsville Public Utilities Board's financial performance report for the period ending June 30th, 2024. Mr. Pettis?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mike Pettis. I'm the Chief Financial Officer, and I will be presenting the financial performance report for BPUB as of June 30th, 2024. So here we've got the executive summary, which focuses on 7 categories. Each category has its own gauge meter, red representing poor, yellow average, and green good. So on the flow of funds, year to date, we've generated $11.47 million to fund the capital improvement projects. The debt service coverage is also at 2.69 times, which is well above the 1.25 times minimum requirement. So we're doing well in this area. On the fuel purchase and energy charge, the current rate has generated $6.57 million as of balance as of June 30th, and this will be used to offset any future market uncertainty. So we're doing good there as well. As far as the COB cash transfer, our adjusted gross revenues are higher than we've budgeted. We're actually about $940,000 above budget, and so this is obviously great news for the city and PUB as well. Regarding personnel expenses, those are pretty much in line with budget. Our non-personnel expenses, though, are about $6.3 million below budget, and some of that is primarily due to timing issues, and others just really savings on our part. And we'll go over that a little bit further on another slide. So we're doing good there as well. And now, as far as BPUB's average bill, the electric average bill, right? We are higher than the average MOU, but we are lower than the average IOU bill for the 1,000 kWh user. And so we're doing average in this area. As far as our CIP spending, we are still lagging behind. We've spent $26 million year to date, which represents about 28.34% of the fiscal year 24 approved plan, where we really should be around 75%. And so we'll talk more about this at a subsequent slide. So we are currently in compliance with all key financial metrics. Here we have a condensed statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. This is in compliance or in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. This is the same format or statement that we would see in the annual comprehensive financial report. And so here we compare current year to date to the same period last year. Starting off, line 1, operating revenues of $170,753,000. We're about $3.6 million below last year's level. We did see our sales increase about $12.7 million year to date. But then over the last year, PPUB did use about $9.5 million in the rate stabilization fund to pay down the customer service production cost in November and December, as it was approved by the board. And so that lowered the variance there to $3 million. Line 2 operating expenses are $150,681,000. These are $11.3 million over last year. And the primary factors here are the increased personnel cost from the implementation of the compensation study. So we arrive at line 3, operating income, $20,071,000. We then go to line 4. Our net non-operating expenses were $11,137,000. These are about $33.4 million below last year's level. And so the major difference here is that back in May of 2023, it's when we issued the Tenasca Equity Fund distribution. That alone was about $31.3 million that we distributed last year. And so, and the remaining difference represents increase in interest earnings this year as compared to last year. So now we're at line 5, income before capital contributions of $8,934,000. We add in capital contributions of $8,769,000, and we end up with an increase in net position year to date of $17,704,000. Adding this to the net position At the beginning of the fiscal year, we end up with a net position at the end of the period of $470,313. I'm sorry. And so here we've got the summary of revenues and expenses on the flow of funds. This is in compliance and in conformance with the bond ordinance. We could say this is pretty much done on a cash basis. And what we do here is we're comparing the year-to-date actuals to the year-to-date budget. So operating revenues year-to-date, $171,898,000, or $6.6 million under our budgeted amounts. Here again, now this line item includes both our base revenue and our fuel revenue. So on the base revenue side, we did see increases of about $4.5 million over budget. And then the remaining difference, we did see the fuel and the off-system sales decrease by about $11.1 million. Other revenues, $20,560,000, were $4.5 million above budget. A lot of this is attributable to the ancillary services that we generated through the ERCOT market, and again, increases in interest earnings over last year, or over the budget, I'm sorry. And so we end up with gross revenues of $192,458,000. Once we subtract out the fuel and the Southmost Regional Water Authority contributions of $64,916,000, we end up with adjusted gross revenues of $127,542,000. This is the basis for the 10% City of Brownsville calculation, and so the city is entitled to $12,754,233 as of June 30th, 2024. Once we back out other requirements for O&M, non-operating expenses, and debt service of $91,251,000, and also backing up the City of Brownsville's usage of $4,604,000, we arrive at the line 7 balance available after requirements of $31,686,000. Once we back out the cash transfer to the city, lesser usage of $8,149,000, we end up with the balance available for transfers out or for PUB uses of $23,536,000. That $23 million went ahead and funded $12,067,000 for our CIP budget, and the remaining balance of $11,468,000 went ahead and replenished our improvement fund. Now, Section 14 of the bond ordinance dictates the priority of how we spend those utility revenues. Priority number 1 is make sure we pay our O&M expenses. Priorities 2 through 9, we pay our debt service and debt service requirements. Priority number 10 is the cash transfer to the City of Brownsville. Number 11 is replenishment of our operating fund. And the 12th and final bucket or priority is the replenishment of the capital improvement fund. This is what we refer to as a closed loop system. All those funds that remain in the capital improvement fund are then used to cash fund our capital projects. Now, I will add that $11,468,000 that flows through replenish our capital improvement fund it's made up of a combination of additional revenues, as reported, and then a reduction of our operating expenses. Again, through savings on our end, and because of the timing of the expense issues, and I'll explain that real quick. So every month we close our books on the 10th of every month, so that we can generate our financial statements, do quality reviews before we present to the board. And so any vendor invoices that come in after those dates are really captured the following month. And so that's why we're short as far as reporting when we're reporting to budget, but we will catch up at the end of the fiscal year. So we do keep the books open a lot longer. Here we've got a comparison of budget to actuals for our personnel O&M expenses for the current year and the 5 years history. So for the current year, we're actually just $430,000 below budget. The large variance that we see there in fiscal year 2022 is attributed to the budgeted compensation study that wasn't fully implemented until early fiscal year 2023. And so here we've got the budget or actuals, non-personal O&M expense comparisons, current year and past 5 years. So this is where we see the $6.3 million decrease or under budget in the non-personnel expenses, and it's, again, attributed to those savings and the timing of the expenses. Here, we're reporting the City of Brownsville transfer summary. So that 12.75 year-to-date, $12.75 million transfer to the city is $940,000 above budget and about $980,000 above prior year's levels. Here we present the average electric bill and the fuel and purchase energy charge. The average electric bill for BPUB customer with 1,000 kWh was about $139.48, so lower than the IOUs and slightly higher than the MOUs. The fuel purchase energy charge rate at the end of June, or for the month of June, was set at 7.8 cents. And we've generated a balance in our fuel account of $6.57 million, again, to mitigate any other future valuations. I would like to report, though, that here on August, the Risk Oversight Committee did lower that FPIC rate down by 20%, down to a 6.27 cents rate. That does bring the average electric bill down from the $139.48 down to $123.80. And that represents about an 11.24% drop on the average bill. So that's great news for our customers. And we'll go into more detail in the closed session. Here we've got our capital improvement plan. I am going to skip this particular slide. We do have a separate agenda item that's following the financial report. It's going to go into a much more detail on our CIP plan. Here we've got our key financial metrics. Debt service coverage ratio, actual through June, were 2.69 times. Again, well above the 1.25 debt covenant requirement. BPUB's outstanding debt was at $272,035,000, with an annual debt service of $28,884,000. The debt to capitalization ratio for PUB year to date was at 40%, compared to the municipal utility medium of 38%. And so what this ratio indicates is that PUB's capital structure consists of 40% debt. This also indicates that PUB has capacity for additional borrowings for future needs. Our days cash on hand is at 421 days as compared to the industry standard of 180 days. Our bond ratings at Moody's are A2, outlook stable, and Fitch and S&P at A- with an outlook stable. All of our reserves are fully funded. The capital improvement reserve, just over $15 million. The debt service reserves, net of our surety policies, at about $15.8 million, and the operating cash reserve at $17 million. On this last slide, we have our customer receivable metrics. The accounts receivable at the end of June 30th was at $19,528,000, of which 98.7% is within that 30-day period, so that's good news. So on the utility assistance side, we've collected $1,121,000 utility assistance. This is significantly lower than the prior years, and a lot of it is due to some federal budget cuts, 50% really. So the Community Actions Corporation of South Texas, KCOS, the nonprofit that offers those utility assistance to our customers, had their funding dropped from $4 million down to $2 million this year. And so what PUB has done is we went ahead and partnered with the Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley to help us, to assist us in distributing funds that are currently in our SHARE program, which are about $1.2 million. So that'll continue assisting our customers as we go forward. The average customer receivables collection period for fiscal year 24 is about 19.11 days. So that too is very, very good. That concludes the financial presentation. There's a lot of other additional information that's included in your packet for your review. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
You have any questions? Yeah, I have a question just on the CIP, that funding. I know that you said that we were behind at, what was it, 28%, and we're supposed to be at 77%?
Right.
Do you think that gap is going to I mean, what do you expect for the rest of the year?
Well, we've got 3 months left in the fiscal year, so it's going to remain quite low. And then we're going to go over a different presentation just right now and provide more insight into that. But we're looking into doing a lot better, working a CIP plan for the 2025 budget year that's more in line to what we're actually spending on a year-to-year basis.
Okay.
So this has been a concern of ours since I've been on the board, and I'm guessing since before Art's even been on the board. And one of the things that Mark and everybody else has said that they would, or that we're trying to implement now is a structure that allows us to better predict what we can do in a year and what we can pay for in the year. So I'm hoping, and yeah, I say it out loud just because I want to hold feet to the fire. I'm hoping that we see an improvement in this in the next year.
Okay. Do you
Any other
need
questions?
Yeah, do you need a recommendation from the committee, or?
No,
Through the
no,
board.
we'll make the same presentation to the full board on Monday,
Okay,
so we'll be fine.
very good. All right,
All right,
thank you.
thanks.
Okay, next item, presentation, discussion, and possible recommendation on the year-to-date capital expenditures as of June 30th, 2024. Mr. Rangel?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is George Rangel. I'm the finance manager here at PUB, and I'll be going over the five-year capital improvement plan by category. Like Mr. Pettis said, our approved plan for fiscal year 2024, and that's on column C, is at $91,717,365. We're 9 months into our fiscal year, so we should be closer to 75% or about $68 million. But as you can see, column D, our year-to-date actuals are at $25,994,000, so close to $26 million. And so, as Dr. Holman has pointed out, this has been something that we have been struggling with for the past couple of years. To offer a little bit of context, over the last 5 years, I don't think we spent anywhere more than about $40 million, but we continue to add on projects that are necessary. It's not that we're trying to get projects that are not necessary for our infrastructure. We have a lot of need. A lot of our infrastructure is aging, and so we need to make sure that these projects get done. However, the problem is resources. It's hard to find people on staff that can handle the load of the projects that are coming on board. It's also difficult in finding vendors or contractors when we choose to outsource because of the lack of resources that we have internally. And so we've been seeing bids that come in at maybe one vendor, two at the most. We've even had situations where we haven't had any vendors, and so we have to go out for we have to rebid that process entirely to start over. And so that's a lot of the holdups that we're seeing. A lot of our capital equipment, we have some equipment that's been ordered for about maybe upwards of a year and a half, and it's just supply chain issues that we get from the manufacturers, and so we're kind of at the mercy of when these vehicles are available to distribute to us. And so unfortunately, we have issued out POs because we know that they're committed, but we haven't received the inventory, and so until we've received that, we're not going to make payment, and so that kind of skews our numbers a little bit as well. One of the proactive approaches that we're taking this year is that we are meeting closely with our directors to try to get a more realistic plan going for fiscal year 25 and forward. I was actually part of a committee that just recently looked at some bids for a capital planning software. And so we are going to be implementing that in fiscal year 2025, but obviously it is going to take some time to kind of get a better handle on how that implementation is going to affect us overall. But we are trying to mitigate this issue and trying, like I said, to get a plan that's more realistic with what we can do with the resources that we have.
So it's not a funding issue,
No.
it's a resource issue.
It's a resource issue, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if Mr. Dombrowski or Mr. Pettis want to add anything else to that, or?
Well, in addition to the resource issues, it's also a fundamental methodology problem. And so we went through each of these categories and we did a deep dive into why isn't it we're accomplishing higher rates. And each one of these have a different story on why. From, for example, customer connection. So that's really driven by how many new customers you have. And it's going to be whatever the local economy is pushing on us. But one thing we did find is we used to call it carryovers. And so if you have $5 million one year, you spend $4 million, you have $1 million left over, we carry it forward to the next year. But that's not how customer connections work. If it doesn't get connected this year, it's not going to extend next year. You'll get a new pot of money next year. So we eliminate these carry forwards in the new budget. Grant funded, it's often driven on some other agency to initiate the work. And so we have to have the money in the budget. We have to be ready to go, just like utility relocations. If Tex Talk calls us and says a project we were going to do next year is going to happen this year, it's going to happen. And so Those are a little out of our control, but we have to have those dollars in the budget ready to go when those agencies are ready to go. The things that are more under our control, like proposed projects out for bid and in design, that's where the resource issue gets to be. So even if we are going to do an RFP and hire a contractor to do the work, it takes us time to do the statement of work, to issue the RFP, to evaluate it, to negotiate that and get that going. And so what we're finding out is kind of like a buffet. Our eyes are bigger than our stomach sometimes. We're biting off more than we can chew. So one of the things we're doing is we're looking at the life cycle of a CIP project and making sure it's like a cash flow approach. How much can you actually design in 1 year? Only you put those dollars for that design work in that year. How much will you do in construction? Put that in the proper year. The tool that we're going to acquire is going to help us do that. And so these projects will still get done. It may not be on the timeline that we normally do it, but I think we'll get a better, smoother approach so that that single metric, which is our spend rate, will get much higher. But we're going to get more granular. We're going to look at each individual project and find out what's going on with that project. And I think this tool will help us as well as getting some better project management.
That'd be very useful because, proposed projects, you guys have only spent, what, about 50,000? Oh, 457,000? There you go.
Well, so that's the initial
$100.
the initial category that it's in. But then once it moves into like in design, out for bids, that gets reduced from that category and moved into the appropriate category. So as the life cycle of that project changes, we have to make that accommodation on there as well.
Did we ever figure out how much the Hidalgo, retrofitting cost or improvements?
Right. So on Hidalgo, we are an owner, but we're not the operator. And so Calpine is the operator. We work with them to approve a plan. In FY24, our FY24 was a major maintenance program. It's back online as of mid-June. And so you can see the cost reflected there. Another thing we found out in doing this was Calpine uses a calendar year. We use a fiscal year. And so we worked better to get those two aligned so that our capital budget actually reflects what we expect to spend. And so you'll see in FY25 that number is something closer to 500,000
more or less. Mm-hmm.
Because all that major work's already been completed. They'll just do the routine maintenance at that point. So, these are all the things that we're finding out as we get into a deep dive on each of these projects.
Do you remember how we did last year, how the utility district did last year? Was
In
it
terms
about
of
the
spending?
same in terms of the percentage of completion of the CIP?
It was no more than 40, maybe about
40.
35 to 40. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that's what we've been hitting historically.
31.2%.
31.2%.
And one of the things we're doing this year is, once a project's initiated, we're not going to stop a project that's needed from proceeding that's already been started. And so we have a lot of projects in flight, taking longer than they need, again, because of the resource issue. So what we're looking at is staging those projects that need to happen, but being more realistic in that identifying the resource in advance and scheduling that out so we don't start a project and have it take longer than necessary. So we have a couple of big projects coming up, like AMI that's already started. We have the resources that's under contract, big dollars. We have the ARPA funding project, the sewer we're putting in downtown. We have some significant utility relocations that we're assured. That work's going to go forward. Again, those are dependent upon TxDOT and the city of Brownsville. They tend to use their contractor. We participate in it. So we're looking at all of these and saying, what is it that we can realistically get done, and what do we need to budget? So I think you're going to see some better numbers coming up in 25, and it should continue to improve as we get stronger in our project management and financial management skills.
Yeah. Ma'am, I know I'm new to the board, but I'd really, at a later time, like to learn more about this, right? Because I know that every construction project that I've ever been associated with has been delayed, right?
Yeah.
And I know right after COVID, it got pretty serious. I know now, though, it seems like the supply chain has really gotten very efficient, right? It's not what it used to be. Delaying capital improvements is going to, something's going to suffer. Either it's going to be more expensive down the line because it's not being addressed immediately, or there's going to be an issue of quality of service or something, it's never a good thing to delay those things, but understanding that the real world, there are a lot of challenges, right? And so I think, number one, absolutely doing a better job in setting a realistic project calendar and completion rates is critical. And then just two, making sure that they're the right priorities, right? And if there is a need to kind of rethink about resources, I think at least those options need to be presented at some committee or to the board, to see how it can be done. Maybe with the options that are presented, it's just way cost ineffective, so we're not going to do that, but it would be at least good to consider some of those options, because, 30-40% of capital improvements, when it's not a funding issue, we're gonna pay sooner or later.
Yeah.
And that's what my experience has told me, and I know it's very difficult work too. It's not easy.
Just a quick comment, Mark, if you could predict, what do you think it would look like 2 years from now in terms of a CIP completion? And you even mentioned by the year 25, we're going to complete, I know the AMI and the other big projects, but in general, do you think we'll be in a better position?
I do. I think it's going to get better in 25 than it was in 24, and 26 will be even better. I think we're getting a better handle. We created a asset management CIP delivery group headed by David Ramirez, who is going to institute some tight controls around project management. We have this new software that's going to come up before the board that will, so as opposed to using Excel spreadsheets that's managed by all, 30 or 40 different project managers, it's going to be centrally located, this single point of truth. We're going to give you better metrics. Right now you have a single metric, which is this grand total, and there's, it's not an absolute truth, that number.
Yeah.
For example, as Mr. Pettis points out, we have all these vehicles that are on order. It's like encumbered funds.
Right.
We don't actually spend them until the vehicle shows up. But those funds that showed look like they haven't been spent, they've already been obligated to a vehicle that might not get delivered for 18 months.
Sure.
You need to understand that. Utility relocations, we may be on hold for a text dot issue. Those funds are going to remain in the budget until that work happens. The text dot will eventually move, and we'll get that work done. So better understanding, this was our first cut last year, is keep looking at that and better understanding each individual project as opposed to this big gross number that doesn't give quite a true story.
Sure.
That makes sense. Thank you.
And I do want to add that we are scheduling, or we're going to schedule some one-on-one board briefings to go over the budget, which includes the capital portion of that, sometime in the week of the 19th. And so that's sometime that we can dive into the details of the CIP plan and how that works, and give you, a little bit more peace of mind on how we're running the program and how we can kind of shift that going forward.
Yeah.
Is that in September or August?
August.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've read the information. I think the financial position of the utility is very strong. Liquidity, covenants, debt service, everything is positive. Which is not the case with all, public entities, right? I mean, I think PUB is very well managed from that perspective. And now it's just a matter of executing on these projects so that, the services and the cost
Aligned.
can be reasonably, predicted in the future. So,
That's all I had. If y'all don't have any other questions.
that's all. Very, all right. So we're moving to item number 3. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rangel. Presentation, discussion, and possible recommendation on the status update of fiscal year 2025, budget process and budget calendar. Back again, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is George Rangel. I'm the finance manager, and I'm going to be giving the presentation on the preliminary proposed budget for fiscal year 2025. And so, as I mentioned before, we will be having some. This will be information that's more like high level, but definitely we're going to be getting into the weeds and the details of things once we have those one-on-one briefings. But again, once I go through the presentation, any questions that you all might have, we can discuss it at this time. And so the first slide that we have on here is our proposed budget source of funds. So these are our revenues. All right. And so for fiscal year 25, we're estimating about $276 million in revenues. And the pie chart that you see below identifies all of the categories that break up that revenue. And so I want you to notice that the first two, or the biggest two slices that we have there on the pie are part of the electric piece. And so we'll see there that we have on our top left the electric base rate revenues. This is more like our fixed costs of our base rate revenues, right? Whatever the approved base rates are for the year times the consumption of the population of our customers, that's what we came up with that number. Now, we do have a model that we use to kind of project these numbers out. We use historical data. We take other assumptions into account. If there's any planned rate increases, we incorporate those as well. And then we also look out for any anomalies, like maybe one year we'll have like a winter freeze event, or maybe we just have an extraordinarily hot summer. And so because all of that is consumption driven, we want to make sure that we smooth out all of that out when we do our projections. The next slice after that is the electric FPEC revenues. So these are revenues that we collect from our customers for all of the electricity that we provide to our customer base. And so this is what we call a pass-through. Whatever the fuel amount is that we pay to provide that energy gets passed on to our customer base as well. And so when we start talking about the expenses, you'll see that exact same number, $88,225,000. The next slice, going clockwise, you'll see the electric off-system sales. Sometimes we have the opportunity where we have more electricity than we need. And so sometimes there's an opportunity to sell that off into the open market. And so we're estimating about a $10 million generating in revenues for that particular item. The next slice we have is our water revenues. That's projected to be at $35,511,442. As part of the model that we have, we did incorporate some planned 4% increase in rates that we are going to see on January 1. And so you will see that the water revenues are a little bit higher than last year because of that rate increase. Moving on to the next slide, you'll see the Resaca fee. Currently, that Resaca fee is set at $6.25 per customer. And so based on the customer growth that we've seen throughout the year and what we're estimating for 25, we are estimating that we are going to hit $4,221,546 on the Resaca fee. Moving on to the next slide, we'll have our wastewater revenues. Again, similar to water, they are going to experience a 4% increase on their rates come January 1st as well. And so we are projecting about a $33 million revenues for that. And then we have our other revenues and non-operating revenues coming in at $18,100,159. And that is comprised of several different things. We have penalties and late fees. We have connection charges. We have a new fee this year that's coming up for the cross-connection customer service inspections. That's rolled into that as well. We have pole rentals. We have miscellaneous income, and then other non-operating revenues that we have rolled up in there as well. And then lastly, we have our interest revenue at $5,100,000. For fiscal year 24, we budgeted at $6 million, and we're currently closer to about 7 or 8 already in June. And so we do see that market conditions are going to be, there might be a downturn. And so to be conservative, we are reducing that from the $6 million this year to $5.1 million for 25. Any question on the revenue side? Okay. Moving on to the next page, we'll go ahead and concentrate on our expenses. And so you'll see that number, we have what we call a balanced budget. So whatever revenues we have, we spend and reinvest into our infrastructure. And so again, we'll go ahead and start with the largest slice at the top. That's our power supply cost. As I mentioned before, the $88,225,000 is the same cost that you see on the revenue side that gets offset by the customer. Then going clockwise to that, you'll have our off-system power supply cost. The $10 million that we anticipate to get from the off-system sales, this is the cost associated to that $10 million. And so it's at $5 million for fiscal year 25. Next, you'll see our contribution to the Southmost Regional Water Authority budget of $7,095,158. And then down below that, you'll see personnel expenses of $57,369,460. This year, we did include a inflationary wage adjustment. According to inflation is a big topic, right? Nowadays, we've seen that the cost of goods overall has jumped year over year. The last wage adjustment that we had was back in 22. So going back from 22 all the way to 23, there was a 3.1% increase, and then another additional 3% increase from 23 to 24, June to June. And so we have anticipated almost about $1.9 million for that. There is a subsequent slide that I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about that. And then we also are going to be having a presentation on Friday as part of the compensation committee to discuss that and the next item, which is the merit adjustment as well. Something new that we want to implement is a merit adjustment. We don't have a program in place just yet, but we obviously want to have some financing committed to that so that when we come up with how that program is actually going to work and how we're going to tie it to performance or to an evaluation, we have the funding to be able to cover that. Moving on to the next slide, we have the non-personnel O&M expense target. We're still working with the departments to try to set that number, but we are looking at setting that at 42. The next slide, you'll see a historical graph that's going to show you what we spend in the last couple of years, and so we kind of want to stay in line with what we historically spend and not try to go too crazy with spending either above or below. Then we have our Resaca maintenance O&M, Resaca fee-funded activities. Currently, our Resaca department is funded by two different ways. We have a Restore grant that we currently have, and then we have the Resaca fee that we're collecting. And so anything that's not covered by the Restore grant is covered by that Restore fee, and so that's the amount that we've allocated for fiscal year 25, taking into account what we have left over in the Restore grant for that particular department. And then moving on to our next slides, we have our other non-operating expenses staying flat at about 1.1 million. This is similar to what we saw in fiscal year 2024. Then on the next slides, we have our debt service payments of 28,485,892. Then we have our city gross transfer. That's the entire benefit to the city of 17,599,671. That's the 10% that we were talking about when we were going over the flow of funds. And then we have a fund this year for decommissioning. Our Silas Ray plant is, pretty aged, it's got a lot of wear and tear, and so we've been trying over the years to provide repair and maintenance, but unfortunately it is going to come to a point where decommission is going to be inevitable. And so we're trying to get a head start on that and trying to create a fund that's going to help mitigate some of those decommissioning costs. So it's not something that's going to happen in the next 1 to 2 or even 3 years, but it is something that we're planning for in the future because we are going to have to absorb those costs as they come into play.
Is 6 still functioning?
Functioning? Yes.
Cool.
Okay, and then we have a power supply reserve of 1.5 million. And so this is to kind of mitigate any large fluctuations in our FPEC rate that we assess to our customers. And so if there's anything that happens where we might have a bad month where we may be undercollected, this would help kind of fund that so that there won't be a big change to the customer billing month over month. And then we have our Resaca CIP funding. So money that's collected through the Resaca fee, it not only pays for our O&M portion of expenses, it also pays for CIP type projects and equipment. And so we're projecting about almost 1.9 million for fiscal year 25. And then the last piece of the pie is going to be our capital improvement funding, which is scheduled to come in at 19.3 million. Any questions on the expenses or?
No.
Okay. Moving on to the next slide, like I mentioned before, we do have a non-personnel comparison graph. If you look back to fiscal year 22, we had about 39 million in actual expenses, 41 in 23, and then the approved budget for fiscal year 24 was at almost 45 million, but we're projecting that we're going to end the year at about 38 million. And so the browner column there, the second to the last column, is what was originally requested by the departments when we first kicked off our program back in June. And so like I said, we've honed that in, and we're sticking to a target of 42 million to keep us in line with what we historically have been spending. Any questions on this slide? Then, as mentioned before, we do have our proposed supplemental personnel adjustments. The inflationary wage adjustment is scheduled to come in at about 4% for all personnel, and that's estimated again at about 1.9 million. And then we have our merit adjustment, which is currently budgeted at 500,000, and then we are pending to develop criteria and a methodology for implementation sometime in 2025 if that's approved. And then towards the bottom of that, you'll see the departmental requests for personnel additions and promotions. And so on the left side, you'll see the new positions. We had 58 requests come in for a total personnel cost of about 4 million. And then we had 42 requests for promotion, and that's coming in at about 156,000 in total personnel costs. Now, there is a note there at the bottom that does say the 57 million that I had in the pie, that includes 150,000 for promotions. So that's already baked in there, and so whatever that gets us, that's what we'll fund. And so eligibility and implementation is determined by HR. We just provide the funding.
Couple of questions.
Sure.
On average, what's the kind of the open rate for, or unfilled position rate?
It's
for you?
about an 8 to about 7 to 9% rate of vacancies. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that translates to about maybe 50 to almost 60
And
positions.
But when you do your budget, you're doing at full employment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the 4% wage adjustment,
Mhm.
do you have different tiers for different salary levels, or is it like 4% across the board?
It's 4% across the board. Yeah, we don't have like a tiered system. I know in the past there's been different implementation methods. If we get direction from the executive team or the board how you all want to implement that, we can play around with the numbers. But we wanted to secure at least the funding to be able to know this is what we can afford.
Okay.
Yeah.
George, give me an example of a merit adjustment. I know budgeted $500,000. What's an example of merit adjustment for me?
So let's say, for example, I have an employee who is a high-performing, he's high-performing, and we have a rating scale in our evaluation, anywhere from 1 being the lowest to 5 being high. So let's say we have somebody who's consistently a 5 individual. That's someone who would be, who might qualify for a merit. Like I said, we don't know how it would work 100%, but that's kind of the idea behind that. It's got to be tied to some sort of performance. Yeah. Then on the next slide, we thought it was important to highlight the requested positions. And so as I mentioned, there was 58 positions that were requested overall, but currently of the divisions that requested those 58 positions, they have about 21 in vacancies. And so we are having some issues with hiring the higher level type positions. We have to compete with like the LNGs, with SpaceX, and other entities that have opened up around town. And so there's a need for positions, but we also struggle with filling some of the positions that require higher level of either education or experience. And so we just thought it was important to kind of highlight that so that you all can see that there is a need out there, and that we do have departments that have vacancies as well.
So for new positions, what process do y'all go through in order to kind of justify those?
So usually what they'll do is they assess their department overall, and then they'll go ahead and make determination on whether they have the enough resources to do the work. There are some situations where additional duties are assigned to that department. Maybe they consolidate, maybe they got rid of another department, and they had to consolidate those issues. And so now everybody has to do more work. And so maybe that can't be done with the staff that we had before, so now we need to have another individual come in. Sometimes there might be something that's compliance driven, and so maybe now we didn't have to do a certain type of inspections, but now we do. And so maybe now we might need a position for that. And so that's what some of these requests
Is that
kind of.
decision made at the director level, or?
The requests are made at the director level, but the approval gets done at the executive and the board level. You all tell us whether we can do that or not.
Yeah.
We just come with the requests. And then we
Now,
have
one
to just
one thing I do want to point out is that none of those 58 positions of $4 million are included in the O&M budget that was just presented. They're not in there.
Correct. Yeah, so once we have those one-on-one briefings, then we talk about that.
Yeah.
We can kind of make a case for them, and then you all will let us know, yes, we can afford all of them, or maybe just a few, or let's look at the ones that are driven by certain factors, and then we can kind of go that route.
And Mike, I know I've asked this question in the past. Sometimes we're carrying a lot of vacancies. And that's money that's put up. That's encumbered money. And that carries from year to year in a categorical fund and a special fund?
No, the vacancies are not carried, the vacancies that we have, that doesn't carry year over year. The budget starts over the next year. But we do include that as part of our budget request.
Now, those vacancies, we do have a contract account to show those vacancy savings, so they're already factored into this budget.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
And then the last 3 slides that we have are the combined utility summary of approved revenues and expenses. This is the same format that Mr. Perez presented, our flow of funds and our financials. And so if you look at column D, fiscal year 2025 proposed budget, you'll see that we start off with our operating revenues, which includes our base rate revenues, our FPEC revenues, Resaca fee, and our off-system sales revenues, giving us net operating revenues of $253,116,000. Then we add in our other revenues, our interest from investment, our other non-operating revenues, giving us gross revenues of $276,316,863, which is the number you saw in the first two slides. Then we back out our power supply costs, off-system power supply costs, our contribution to SRWA, and you get to the adjusted gross revenues of $175,996,705, which is the 10%, the number that we use to calculate the 10% to the city. Then we back out our personnel O&M expenses, our non-personnel expenses, the Resaca fee expended O&M, which gives us the subtotal of expenses of $101,731,000. And then we have our supplementary personnel adjustments that I mentioned, which are the inflationary wage adjustment and the merit adjustment, depending on how the board gives direction on that, but they are included in here. And then our other non-operating expenses of $1.1 million. So overall total operating expenses is $205,531,000. If we subtract that out to our adjusted gross revenues, we go ahead and we get to our balance available for debt service and other legal purposes, which comes out to about $70,785,000. From that, we back out our debt service payments of $28,485,892, gives us balance available after debt service of $42,299,672. And then, as I mentioned, we have the total cash utility benefit on line 72 to the city of $17,599,671. But of course, we do back out their usage, which is estimated to be at $6,271,078. So the cash transfer that the city should anticipate is $11,328,593. And so that will give us a balance available for transfers out of $24,700,001, which supports our 1.5 million in the fuel adjustment, 19,346,22 in CIP funding, 1,859,000 on the Resaca CIP funding, and then the $2 million for the decommissioning reserve. That makes up the 24,700,000. And so if you look at the very bottom, our debt service coverage ratio that we are budgeting for the year is at 2.48 times, which is well above our 1.25 requirements. And so that is all I have, unless you all have any other questions or.
When is the deadline to get the budget approved by the board?
So our fiscal year starts October 1, and so we usually try to get it done by our September board meeting. That's where so that's why I was saying that the one-on-one briefings will happen sometime in the week of the 19th of August, because we really want to make sure that we have all the information ready to present to you all so that you all can make a decision by that time.
Okay.
George, just a quick comment.
Sure.
I'll jump on something Mr. Rayad said. I think the financials look great. I mean, this public entity is what it is. It's a public record. I wish we could do more on the CIP. I wish there's been vacancies. I know the child care rate since COVID. It's tough to compete with the LNGs.
Art, you need to speak into the microphone.
I'm sorry. It's tough to compete with SpaceX on these
Yes.
vacancies and the LNGs. The financials look really good. Hopefully, we'll catch up with that CIP.
Hopefully, yes.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add to what Art said, I think the vacancy thing is something he's expressed as an issue many times, and I feel is significant as well. And so I think the board, just as a heads up, will be paying more attention and try to get our fingers in this a little bit more to make sure that is moving forward and we're not holding positions that shouldn't be held.
Okay.
You know, I agree. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to be proud here, a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to have vacancy rates or open position rates like 80%. And I would tell you over the last couple of months, I think we have in our company, in the whole two-state area, Brownsville has the highest vacancy or job open of approved positions. And that's at 97% fully filled positions. We only have 3%. We've never seen anything like that before.
Wow.
So, and that really surprises us because of the LNG and the SpaceX and then all the businesses that they feed that are growing. They need to hire more people, talk to a lot of people and services that are really hurting right now. But it just seems like, you know, there's a couple of things that can be done. that maybe we could attract them, you know, I mean, I think PUB is a great place to work, you know, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of positive things about it, right? Not only helping out the community with necessary services, but there's a lot of other great things about it, so definitely that needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
I mean, the fact that you have supermodel board members means, I mean, come on.
That always helps.
Okay, any other questions? No? Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Rangel.
Thank you all.
Okay. And then we have, I guess, item number 4, presentation, discussion, and possible recommendation on current bank depository agreement with Wells Fargo. And you're not Miguel Pettis, are you?
No,
No, I didn't think so, because it says Miguel Pettis here.
on behalf of Mr. Perez, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee members. My name is Jorge Santillan, Treasury and Accounting Manager. I'm going to go over the presentation on Bank Depository Services agreement with Wells Fargo Bank. The current agreement was approved by the Board of Directors on March 14, 2022. It's for a 3-year term. It started on June 1st, 2022 and ends on May 31st, 2025. It includes a renewal option consisting of 2 one-year extensions. There also includes a termination clause that states the BPB expressly reserves the right to terminate the depository agreement with or without cause at any time by providing 30-day written notice to the depository to close its accounts. Here we're presenting 2 scenarios or 2 options. This is the first scenario, letting the agreement expire on May 31st, 2025 and not renew the agreement. The timeline of events would be as follows. On November 24, 2024, we will notify the current depository of intent not to renew the agreement, and then soon after release the request for proposals for bank depository services. On January 2025, proposals received are evaluated. February 25, we will present results to the Finance Committee. March 25, BPB Board considers to award the new service agreement. And if the selected bank is other than Wells Fargo, then there would be a 2-month implementation in April and May 2025. Then on June 1st, 2025, the new bank depository service agreement begins. Again, if the selected bank is other than Wells Fargo, and as the footnote states, a temporary service agreement with current depository will be required during the transition period. This transition period would take approximately 3 to 4 months after the new agreement begins. Then we have the second scenario, or second option. This would be to terminate the agreement with a 30-day notice. In this scenario, on September 2024, the BPB Board approves to terminate the agreement, followed by the agreement termination notice issued to Wells Fargo. Then we would then follow the same process as in the first option. And on May 1st, 2025, a new bank depository service agreement begins. Again, in this option, as stated on the footnote, a temporary service agreement with current depository will be required from the agreement termination date of around October 2024 until the end of the transition period around the end of August 2025. Now, the difference between 2 options is a 1-month difference when the new depository agreement will start. In the previous example, in the previous scenario, it will start on June the 1st. In this scenario, on May the 1st, 2025. Some of the current services provided by the current depository, we have 25 checking accounts currently earning 1.65 earnings credit. The balance as of June 30th was $3,012,025. We have 6 liquid investment accounts currently earning 5.17%. The balance as of June 30th was $23,913,721. We also have lockbox services. These services processes the remittance of utility payments. We also have direct debit services. This is services where the utility bills are debited from customer bank accounts as previously authorized. We also have vault services for our daily deposits. Checks, continuing with the services, checks and clearing, check clearing and ACH direct deposits. These are the under the accounts payable function, which this average around 17,100,276 monthly. Then we have the payroll ACH direct deposits, which Monthly, the net amount is approximately $2,097,637 monthly. And then also we have desktop deposit services, which allows for electronic deposit of checks. Some of the safety of public funds features: all bank accounts, all bank deposits, and investment accounts at Wells Fargo are secured with pledged securities or insured through the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. We also use Wells Fargo Securities Clearing and Safekeeping Services. These services provide for the BPB Securities Investment Program. Now, we also have some of the fraud prevention features. We have Positive Pay, which where the bank only honors checks issued by PUB that are pre-authorized. We also have vendor ACH verification services through the early warning services for vendors signing up for electronic payment. We have Debit Blocks, which protects against unauthorized electronic withdrawals. And then we have dual authorizations and security tokens. We plan to include this take it to the full board at the next board meeting. And I guess you have any questions?
Questions?
It's good information. I think it's good that we're going to present it to the board at the next scheduled meeting.
Now, on this particular item, we are requesting a recommendation from the committee as to what options do you want us to.
Yeah.
Personally, I mean, I would recommend to go ahead and allow the current bank depository contract to end May 31st of 2025. And then at that time, we can transition over to the new bank if Wells Fargo is not the selected bank. But recommendation,
Yeah.
we can accept
So
any
explain that.
recommendation from the
I mean,
committee.
but you're going to give them advance notice that you're going to let it terminate, that you're not going to go through the extension process, right?
Either way, yeah, if we, in
November, we will.
based on the
This-
timeline, in November, we would be advising them that we're not going to renew the
Right.
contract past May of 2025.
Yeah.
And so at that point, we initiate the RFP process
So-
and hopefully.
So when you're outside of that contract term, right, you're going to go month to month through August. I guess, do you know that if the terms change dramatically, where it's going to be pretty expensive? Or are they going to honor the same terms?
We will need to try to enter into a temporary agreement. Hopefully, they can mirror the same terms that we currently have.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to do the RFP and everything else and keep the contract and just terminate it a month
Right,
before we're done?
and that is the recommendation, right? We let the current contract expire, but we start the RFP process well in advance.
Okay,
And we
so we're not
advise the
gonna-
bank
okay, got it.
that we're not going to renew.
Yeah.
But they're still under contract through May 31st, and then we can transition to the new bank.
Yeah.
Correct.
I would think that it's going to take a long time to transition. That's
Right.
a lot of work.
Right. So even if we go the other
It's not something
option.
that you do in 90 days.
No.
Not with an organization this size.
If we go the other option where we terminate, we're still going to have them on a month-to-month, and in that case, we have to have a separate agreement with them. And who's to say that they don't increase their prices, right? Because they know that they're no longer going to have that contract to the end of their term. So
So, Mike, their expiration date at this time is when? May of next year?
May 31st of 2025, and it's a third-year contract.
Yeah, I think it would be prudent to accept your recommendation to let it expire, and let's move it forward. Present it to the board. I mean, the full board may have something different to say, but
Okay. Now, does the committee want to make that recommendation at the board meeting, or would you like for us to make that recommendation?
The committee makes recommendations, fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, we're not going to bid on the public depository, so.
okay.
Not because we don't love PUB, it's just we don't want any perception of
Conflict.
conflict of interest.
Correct.
We could do it that way, Mike. Present it to the board.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Vidal, you don't have a problem with the committee making a...
I don't have a problem.
No, I think that's great. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, now, you know how the board meetings get, Mike, we don't know. Once we present all the information to the entire board,
Yeah,
let's
they'll-
see how it flows.
Okay.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, do we need to go into closed session?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, at this point, you would recess to closed meeting after announcing under the caption of closed meeting, that a closed meeting was going to be held under the sections and for those topics that are listed, number 1 and 2, including citing the provisions of the Public Information Act. So
Okay.
just
So at this time, the items on the agenda designated for closed meeting will be considered. If there is an approved motion to go into session, then the listeners will be placed on hold until the board returns to the open meeting. So do we need a motion from the committee, or,
Yes, sir.
okay, so I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we move into closed meeting.
There's a first, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
The two items, would you like me to read them? Item number 1 for closed meeting is discussion of the Brownsville Public Utilities Board progress on natural gas hedging strategies and power supply under Section 551.086. Number 2, presentation, discussion, and possible recommendation of information upon pricing of purchased power generation and fuel and their impact upon the fuel, purchased energy, and marketing charge, also under Section 551.086. And the time is approximately 1:01.
Did I ask for the motion too early? Are we okay? We're good? Very
We're
good.
fine.
All right.
The announcement's been made.
Ready? Okay, so it is
Oh,
one.
wait. We're being told.
She gave me the thumbs up. The thumbs rule here. Okay, got another thumbs up. So
There we go.
it is 1:23 and we're returning to open session. In terms of our closed meeting, there was no action taken on the 2 agenda items, and there was no action on future agenda items. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
It's been a pleasure to see you. Absolutely, yep. Although maybe a little bit late, I got jury duty Monday.
Jury duty? State or federal?
State. Well, no, I got to show up to be in the fire. Oh, really? Now, this is my wife got busted last time, and like, she got actually.
Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test.